All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for attending the 8th annual Startup Boston Week. My name is Elena, and I will be your hostess with the mostest today for this particular session. Would like to give a huge thank you again to Suffolk University's Sawyer Business School for hosting this conference. Suffolk University hosts a lot of great opportunities for learning both in and outside of these classrooms. We really appreciate their partnership, hosting the entirety of Startup Boston Week, both this year and last year. Props to Suffolk, thank you. The goal behind Startup Boston Week is to connect the entire greater Boston and New England startup community. All industries, all startup departments, and all bootstrapped and funding stages for 5 straight days of learning and connecting with one another. The team that creates Startup Boston Week is primarily volunteer, and the folks working the conference today here are volunteering their time as well. So thank you all for being here. And thank you all, the attendees, for attending this conference. It is a labor of love, and we really appreciate you playing a role in shaping our startup community. So thank you again. Without any further ado, I will pass it over to our moderator. Today's session, just to make sure that you are in the correct room, is going to be building your brand, how to attract talent as an early stage startup. So without further ado, I'll pass the mic. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us on a Thursday morning. My name is Denise Lamb, and I am the Global Vice President of Talent Acquisition at Acquia. We are an open source digital experience platform headquartered right down the street in downtown Boston. And today, this is one of my favorite topics, and I could go on for hours on this, is defining and building your employer brand. So alongside, I have an amazing panel. We have Emma, Luisiana, and Jason Jones, and we will be talking all things EB. So without further ado, Emma, do you want to start off and introduce yourself, a little bit about your background?
Awesome. Hi, everyone. Happy Thursday. I'm Emma Plouffe, and I lead people and business operations at a minimally invasive surgical robotics company out in Waltham. I've been there for 4 years and excited to be here today.
Hi, I'm Luisiana Cruz, and I am a career mindset coach as well as a talent acquisition leader. Worked with some really great Boston-based startups, and I'm so excited to jump into this topic because it's one that I enjoy the most, really.
Good morning, Jason Jones. I lead global employer brand at Klaviyo. Right down the street, we are a global data marketing platform. I've been in EB for about 10 plus years, TA, tack on another 5 or so after that. I'm excited to be here.
Excellent. Thanks, guys. So today we're covering all things from why, right? Why is employment branding important, to strategy, road mapping, and best practices, tips, tricks, resources to use, and much more. So hopefully we'll get through all the topics, and we can have some time for Q&A afterwards. Yeah? Okay. So before we jump in, I'm curious to hear from you all. When I say employment branding, what do you think of? What does that mean? Anyone?
Don't all jump up at once.
Yeah.
Ooh,
Yeah. Yep.
Being the audience for the person.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Company culture.
Company culture. It's a great one.
Mission.
Mission. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Over here.
I love that. Anyone else? Absolutely. Maybe I'll kick it off with Jason and Luisiana. How would you guys define employment branding?
Last person here, I loved your answer. Yes, it's the perception of how you're perceived internally, but also externally. So I think SHRM has this definition. It's how a company communicates its identity to its employees and the public. So I think of employer brand as perception as reality. How are you perceived internally and externally? Whether that perception is true or false employer brand is always tackling how you are perceived internally and externally.
And to add on to that from a recruiting perspective, really putting value in your employer brand and having a strong one so that you are attracting the right talent when you are posting that job to realize like, oh, you know what? I really want to work at such and such company because their brand online in terms of what their employees are doing and what kind of events they have. It seems like that's the type of culture I want to join. So it translates into the culture. It pours over into the people that are looking at your brands and your companies as like, oh, I could see myself there because that's the type of person I am too. So it bridges the gap when it comes to like relating, engaging, and connecting.
And how does that differ from corporate branding?
Corporate branding, from my perspective, is more so this is the voice that we are when we're speaking to our target audience in terms of whether it's a consumer or the user of our product or who we provide our services to. So you have that two different tracks of like, you know, you go down the line of like, what's our color structure? How do we speak online and social platforms when we're targeting our target consumer versus the brand is more so specific to this is what it's like to live as an employee at this brand.
I'd probably say they're intertwined, interwoven, where your corporate brand dictates your employment brand. The employment brand is kind of like, the corporate brand is kind of the tip of the arrow, and the employment brand is close after that, because how your product is received, how a certain leader at your company is received externally, they dictate how people view your company. We've seen stories in the news of how, what this CEO said, what this company did around the globe, that impacts how you were perceived. Do I really want to work there? Does that company align with my values? I work for a sports betting company. We can't be everyone. If sports betting is against your moral compass, then don't work here. And I'm not going to try to attract you here. And so it's, your corporate brand dictates your employment brand, and that's okay. They shouldn't fight each other, but they should complement one another.
Thank you. That was really helpful. And why is employer branding critical right now in today's job market? This is for the entire panel, whoever wants to jump in.
Yeah, I think in a world where all of us have so much choice, I love, the conversation we've had already about employment brand is your identity. I think of it as it's your personality. So the same way you have a personality as an individual and you have, a group of friends, like if you're an employer, it's what's your personality as a company and how you attract the type of employees you want to. So I feel like one of the reasons it's so important is just because we all have so many choices when it comes to where we work. And so you want to make sure that you are doing the best to showcase the experience that someone's going to have at your company, to showcase what you believe in, and to get them energized about what your company is doing and the impact they could have if they join your company.
I think it's well, I'll talk to more on the recruiting side. I don't know how many recruiters are in the audience today, but in this market, you post a job and within like 45 minutes, you're seeing like 100 somewhat applications, because depending on the candidate strategy, it's either keep applying and throwing spaghetti at the wall until something sticks, versus you have candidates that are targeted. Like, you know what? I like this company. I've been researching them. I've been a company follower and a brand follower forever, and this is my goal to be working here. Having a really truly defined brand identity when it comes to the employer brand is important from a profile perspective, right? You want to be able to really understand what your employer brand is. So when you are reviewing those profiles, when you are interviewing those candidates, you can easily identify the key points that tells you, hey, this is somebody that's going to easily integrate into our employer brand and will eventually be our culture carrier within the company, which obviously we know what the effects of that are in terms of boosting morale, productivity, et cetera, et cetera. So really having that clear understanding of what it is that your employer brand is saying about your company is crucial, even at that stage, at the beginning stages when you're looking for who you're going to bring onto your team.
I would say, not to be difficult, but it's important in any job market. Generally, we're hired through like kind of the hockey growth of a company. Hey, we're hiring. We got to bring on as much people as possible. Let's show the world how great we are. And then, once you miss some kind of financial targets, then you unfortunately have to do, workforce reduction. Employer brand is part of that. Employment brand should really be seen as a vital role in your company. So even if you're not necessarily growing as a company, employment brand can be part of kind of like the internal like data cleanups, processes cleanup. So for instance, like right now at Klaviyo, if we're not like hiring a boatload of people, I'm working with the recruiters on TA documents. How are you messaging candidates? What do those follow-up messages look like? What do we need to create for candidates who are inside the funnel? Not necessarily, hey, here's a cool social media post, hashtag twinning, but also like, what do candidates care about? And then let's develop content for that, because I feel like that's really going to move the needle. Because at the end of the day, we're here to put butts in seats, and that's kind of impact we can have in any job market, not necessarily just one because we're growing.
The right butts and seats, though.
Yes. Thank you.
I also think about too, right? How many of you all have interviewed or thinking about interviewing at a company, and you hear from a friend of a friend, like, oh, that's such a horrible company, et cetera, right? So I think from experience and how that translates to your employer brand as a person, I think is, there's that residual impact that continues to ripple on, right? I can tell you, stories of, oh, I've heard XYZ, or this is my own personal experience. I don't want to interview there, et cetera. So that's why we really want to protect, preserve, and grow our employment brand. Yeah?
Absolutely.
Okay, so switching gears a little bit, I want to talk about vision, strategy, and building your employment branding roadmap. So Emma, when it comes to your employment branding strategy and employee value proposition, what are some of the key considerations for a new or evolving organization?
Yeah, I love this topic. So especially if you're a new organization or earlier stage, like one of the questions that I'm always throwing out to whoever I'm working with, usually the founders, to develop an employment branding roadmap and strategy is, how does this fit into your vision of when you scale? I think that's one of like the most interesting points in time is you might have an employment brand when you're small, but then can this scale with you? And can you do it elegantly? So I think that's definitely a consideration, is thinking about how this employment brand will grow with you over time. And then making sure it's genuine and authentic to who you are. I feel like that's so important. Asking yourselves the question, like, what is the reality of the experience that employees have today? And then how do we showcase that to candidates? And when we think about EVP, employment value proposition, right now at Vicarious Surgical, our EVP sort of falls into 4 different buckets. So when we were crafting it, we were thinking about the people that we have in the organization today, as well as the people that we hope to attract in the future, the experience, the technology. I get to work at a surgical robotics company, which is so cool. So that's a key part of our EVP. And then again, like I mentioned earlier, the impact of both the organization, like what changes if we bring a minimally invasive surgical robotics to market, as well as, again, the impact of each person in the company. So, how do the engineers have an impact? How do the people in marketing have an impact? So those 4 pillars, people, tech, experience, and impact, are what I consider when I think about EVP.
I think your strategy needs to start with like, who do you want to hire? So what does headcount look like? So like, perfect world, when it comes to hiring, say there's never a perfect world, but starting from the end and working backwards. Hey, our goal is to hire 100 BDRs in Boston. All right, what does that look like? Where's the talent at? What's the comp structure? Who's on the interview panel? Once kind of all that is figured out, then it's always working backwards to then I'm helping to influence those decisions, but then, okay, if we need to drive 100 hires, then what does that look like for the number of interviews we have to make? What about the number of phone screens we have to make, the number of whatever? So working backwards and kind of building that kind of reverse funnel with certain metrics and targets, then it's like, okay, we know that we need at least 500 candidates to hit 100 BDRs. That's how I like to work when building an employment brand strategy. It's not just, hey, TikTok is cool, let's post TikToks. Is TikTok viable for us? Maybe, maybe not. It could be supplemental with your branding and hiring strategy, but the data really needs to influence your strategy and conversion numbers. Even if you don't have conversion numbers, you can look at best practices, talk to folks at other companies. Hey, talk about the struggles and what you've done, what you've seen, and kind of build that into your strategy. As long as you're communicating, hey, certain stakeholder, our plan is this, here's how we got to this. It's part science, it's part art. As long as you have an idea of what you're targeting, that's going to help build your strategy at any stage, not just big company, but also a small company. But also be flexible, because again, TA is it's evolving. As we know, it's hard to hire. One day you're hiring, one day you're not. You're not. This location, that location. So, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Piggybacking off of both, developing a strategy is crucial at the beginning. One, understanding the metrics. What are your goals? Like, where are we driving to, and which way are we driving? So when you get into that interview portion of the process, your candidate experience also complements that strategy, right? We can't just say yeah, we believe in work-life balance, and then sending candidates at 8 p.m. a interview request for the next morning at 9 a.m. All of those things layer into the employer brand, because what is that message that's being sent when the candidate experience is off, right? Like, oh, so what? I'm just kind of a number going through your process. Does that mean I become a number when I get there? What's going on, right? So really keeping that in mind, as far as everything both of them have already said, the candidate experience is also part of that strategy, but understanding where you're driving to and what the goal is definitely a driving force for developing what comes next.
Thank you. That was really helpful. I love the nod to candidate experience. And if anyone needs a TikTok masterclass, you guys can reach out to Jason afterwards. Okay, so on the topic of early stage organizations, should an early stage company, try to manage their employer branding in-house, or are there platforms, resources, partners that you guys recommend?
Short answer for me is yes. I've been part of companies as small as 100 folks leading employer brand, or up to a few thousand. I like to start in-houses because we live and breathe the company. We know the ins and outs. But there are tools, say tools on a tool belt. There are tools that can help you elevate your employment brand. So if you're a small startup and you're just trying to how can we just be known in a certain market in a cost-effective way? Example is Venture Fizz, local Boston platform that allows us to elevate our employment brand. Venture Fizz has a feature called Talent on the Move. If you want to be seen as a growing startup, every week you can set a reminder to submit your new hires to Venture Fizz's Talent on the Move. And then they're always going to say, hey, X company hired this person, that person. And over time, the market starts to see your company is oh, wow, I keep seeing people going there. They must be hiring. I want to check them out. That's something that's just a calendar reminder for you to submit a name and a LinkedIn URL. There are tools like a built-in that are a bit more beefed up. They take a bit more people power, but those tools will do a lot of work. You invest in it's kind of like plants. Once you water, get the right soil, give it some sun, you'll see the growth. That's with your employment brand at any stage. Get the right soil, water it, get some sun, be a little patient, but you will see the fruits of your labor over time at any stage. But also too is if you're small, minimal resources, I'd rather you be a mile deep and an inch wide than the opposite, because you don't want to be in all these different platforms. And then you're okay, what do I have to update? And what do we have out there? And what needs this? I'd rather you focus on a few platforms that will do the work for you. And then you can be showcase the ROI there.
I think important fact that you said was keeping it in-house, but using outside platforms to help continue elevating and optimizing it. Your employer brand and culture always comes from inside first, and then it pours out, right? Can't really expect a full entity to just set it up and forget it, and then automatically it's going to do its thing. They're not living inside. They're not living the day-to-day, the pivots, the different things that are popping up that cause, conversation to like kind of provoke thought of like, well, we've been doing it this way, but not really working. Let's move. So really internally, and then layering those other tools on top is really the right way to go.
Yeah. One of the other tools that I'll highlight, I learned about it a few months ago and I love it. So for founders or early stage companies, there's an awesome organization out there called Change Engine. They have a free tool, again, free tool. It's called their Employee Appreciator tool. And one of the cool things about this company is they're trying to make things easier for people in like the people ops world or the marketing world. And so it's a way to make instantly branded like images that can be shared on LinkedIn. So we know like so many people in our network are doing new job announcements or, hey, happy 5-year employee work anniversary announcement. And it's a really cool, easy way to do that. So that's one of my favorite tools, in addition to the other partners that Jason already mentioned, to leverage that can help almost like expand the impact that you can have as a single individual if you are in a smaller organization. And then I love finding internal champions in the organization. Sometimes they're in people and culture, sometimes they're in marketing, but other times they're in other areas of the business and they just have a knack for, coming up with a catchy program name or making a flyer, or they're more out there on LinkedIn. So there's a lot of different things you can do to spread your employment brand wide, even if you are a small, lean team.
So I have a bit of a spicy question for you guys. How much weight do you put on Glassdoor, right? It's, we all know Glassdoor. We all go to Glassdoor. What are your thoughts on Glassdoor?
We all look at Jason.
Everybody's having the same thought in the room. Let's just call the elephant.
Glassdoor is very ubiquitous and it invokes certain emotions. I've been dealing with Glassdoor for a very long time through the, hey, Glassdoor, this is a fraudulent review. Here's why. Please take it down, to, the head of HR saying, what is this negative review? What's going on? How are we going to combat it? And it's like code red, all hands on deck. Glassdoor is a data point. Mm-hmm. It's a data point. Whether you like the data point or you don't, it's a data point, and it should be used to influence how you dictate your culture. So if you're growing, how is your culture evolving? If you're not, depending on where your company is, it's a data point, and it should be used to say, hey, we got a 5-star review. Someone could say, love it here, nothing wrong. Okay, great. Can't do much with that. Thank you. Or it could be a 1-star review that says, I don't like it, run away. Great. Can't do much with that either. So the extreme positive, extreme negative, I take out. I look for the reviews that give a little bit of good and a little bit of bad, but there's meat on the bone where, hey, I like this, I like that, I don't like this, I wish this could be better. Those are reviews you can use to help influence what's happening internally, and combine that with any type of internal engagement data or anything like that you're doing internally. Combine those two and use that to make the necessary decisions, and not just kind of like treat Glassdoor as like the boogeyman and you're fearing of getting a negative review. I mean, look at Google reviews, Yelp reviews, like anyone can complain. Again, perception is reality. Instead of being afraid of Glassdoor, how do we combat Glassdoor? How do we perceive Glassdoor? And they just kind of get everyone on the same page. So that way, once, when you get a 5 or 1-star review, it's not just, the employer brand person is like, oh my God, I'm going to get a negative Slack from a senior leader about what are we doing? What's going on? It's like, hey, we saw it. Here's our plan of attack, but also let's review what's in that. And then look how we're going to, treat that internally.
Yeah. I mean, spot on. I remember Glassdoor before we were doing reviews on companies, and it was just Glassdoor, this is a company. People were supplying like salaries, and I would get on a call with a candidate, and I'm like, well, Glassdoor that says that, a digital marketer is making like 120, and I'm like, really? Like with 2 years, like, so it just goes to show like there's a lot being thrown on there and it could go either way, right? Use it again as a data point to then formulate your own questions, right? Anytime that I'm looking to work with a company, I think I probably check the Glassdoor maybe towards the end before ultimately the first interview. But I do check to see what are people saying? How, like, what's the tone in this? How many people are saying the same thing versus how many are just kind of like rants, right? Individual rants about things. And then come up with my own questions to then ask forward to get the information I need to make my best judgment on the situation. It's like watching a movie. You ask one person, like, how was it? Oh, it was horrible. It was, I never again. I hate so-and-so as an actor. Then you go to somebody else, like, it was the best thing I ever saw. It's changed my life. I love so-and-so. It's the same thing. Everyone has a different experience. There's even today, everyone in this room is going to walk away from a totally different experience and say, Jason said that he absolutely loves Glassdoor and lives in Glassdoor all day long. Jason didn't say that, right? We were right here, but everyone takes away things differently. Same goes for Glassdoor. Same goes for any review, any experience that you see online when someone's giving an opinion, giving an experience or a recount of their experience.
I'll say this too. So like, for example, actually give some, examples. So at Klaviyo, there's the interview section of the reviews. Our candidate experience team, I work with them to compile those reviews from candidates, and then we educate the recruiters. We're not trying to shame anybody, but hey, R&D recruiters, this group of people said this. The hiring manager was late. The recruiter would go to them. So was unprepared. We're not trying to shame anybody, but hey, there are obvious data points of something not going right. What can we do to change that? That's how we use Glassdoor at Klaviyo to make change and not necessarily, hey, you suck as a hiring manager, do better. But also too, I also want to say, like, let's also use Glassdoor as a tool. And so there's a feature where you can upload like press releases and employee stories and things like that. So did your company release a new feature or do a new round of funding? You can put that on Glassdoor because its candidates will follow your company. They'll get email updates, say, oh, wow, X company did this or they did that. There are myriad of strategies to influence reviews from candidates and employees that we can always go down of, like, how do you generate good reviews, or not good reviews, reviews in general, but let's do that tied to tentpole moments. Let's do that tied to anyone who complete a certification and they submitted tuition reimbursement. Let's do that tied to anniversaries. And so I don't want to say like keep Glassdoor at bay, but also there are ways of influencing it.
Thank you. And I think my biggest takeaway is that Glassdoor is a data point, right? For candidates and also organizations too. If you are, if the reviews are coming back with a poor, say benefits package, right? It's a data point to take back to say, maybe this is something we should reevaluate when renewals are coming up, et cetera. So, yeah, it is a data point, and it's a piece of the pie in a greater puzzle. So staying on track with employment branding roadmap, Emma, can you kick us off on what are the stages of an effective employer branding roadmap and how can companies tailor this to their specific needs?
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of like the first stage on a roadmap, I feel like it's again going back to that question, like, who are we today? And it's starting out with the candidate experience and the candidate journey and thinking about how you're going to build these almost like wow moments into the candidate journey when you think about employment branding and how that ties in along the way. When's the right time to talk about values to the candidates that are in the process? When's the right time to potentially expose them to people in the organization? One of the cool things we do, which can absolutely tie into your roadmap depending on your strategy. So we have a program where if you're a candidate, you can choose to speak to someone in the organization who's not on the interview team, they're not in HR, they're, volunteers within our company who will give you real life insight into what the day-to-day experience is like in the organization. So that's an example of something that we've built out intentionally so that the candidate can almost like do that double click on, okay, is what they're talking about or what they're highlighting in their employment branding, does that match with the day-to-day experience that I'm hearing about? So I feel like those are some of the first stops in the employment branding experience, but that carries through, when you make a hire, then it switches from candidate experience to employee experience. So whenever my team and I are building employment branding into the journey, it truly is. It's like a lifelong journey. So it's identifying what the best points in time are for those moments.
I think like the candidate journey is so like fluid. I wish it was like they saw your LinkedIn post and then they went to your career site and then they went to Glassdoor and then they went to Comparably and then they went to Innersight and then they went to Blind. Like I wish it was linear. It's not. I think it's when you're sitting down with your hiring teams, who we're hiring for, what level, things like that, experience, keeping the journey in mind and it's going back to the tools that you're leveraging. And it's okay if you're not on a certain site. A leader may not like that, but again, you don't want to be half-assed on a certain website that like looks incomplete and the candidate's like, are they diverse? Do they live by their values? I don't know. I'd rather you not be there. And then I'd rather you not be there than be there halfway. So yes, as you're thinking of like, hey, where do we show up? Where the candidate's going to be? Let's make sure we show up authentically. Let's make sure we show up with our best foot forward. But also, to employer brand's a team sport. It's not just one person dictating like a general on the battlefield. So leverage the skill sets of the folks who are involved. At Klaviyo, we have a tech blog that's completely managed by a set of R&D folks who like to write. They'll go to a conference or write up on their experience. They'll complete a project and they'll write up their experience. I'm lucky because I get to come in at the end and be like, great, I'm going to add this to this candidate message, or we're going to add this to this Glassdoor, company update. We're going to add to this. And so see who has interest in certain areas and leverage that to your candidate experience, because that can really help you show up authentically as candidates are kind of poking holes and kind of seeing, is this the right fit for me?
I think just from candidate experience to employer brand, being really clear on what is it that you're offering and saying that you do, and then showing up to explain how you're going to do that, right? So if it's like, we really value career growth here. Okay, great. We're talking about in the interview, career growth, but how? What are those indicators? And how are you promising that you will deliver that? So that's also part of your roadmap. So not just like Jason said, it's not linear, but it's almost like a vein, right? There's like these other like branches that come off. So like employer, career growth. All right, this is what that path looks like. And you don't have to do and be everything for everyone. Don't try to offer everything, because that's not sustainable and it's certainly not scalable. So what are like those, 3 or 4 that you could deliver on no matter what kind of day it is that you're having?
Yeah.
One retweet. Sorry. Agree to all of that.
I love that point, because when you think about employment branding, one of the things that I connected to in an organization is the people programs you have. So that sparks a thought when I think about employee development. You can brand so much within your organization. So they're even just like the name of the programs that you run, if you're giving details to candidates, can be so impactful. I was speaking on a panel, and one of the panelists was talking about their sort of like return to work program after COVID, and they called it returning to each other. And I just thought that was like such a nice twist, and it like evokes a different emotion. So even the name of a program can be so impactful. So I'd say that's one of the big focuses of my team internally is if we're designing a reward and recognition program or a certain manager training series or employee development program, we're very intentional about the title because it speaks volumes. And again, it's what do you want people to feel when they hear the name of the program, and how do you catch their attention when you think about your internal programs as well?
Thank you. So I want to talk a little bit about how companies balance the short-term hiring needs, right? Especially any growing organization when you are hiring and hiring and hiring with the long-term employment branding goals and strategies. How does that go hand in hand, and how do you balance that?
I would say be clear on what your needs are and hire for your needs, not because, or let me back up. Hire for your needs, but also take into consideration where you are in the startup journey, right? Where on that path. So if I often see this, sometimes startups jump really quickly to hire like VP of, I don't know, lifecycle marketing. How about, let's think on that. Why does it have to be that VP level, right? What about maybe like a lifecycle senior manager or even director, right? Someone who's still going to be on that IC visual level that is also going to be able to contribute to your culture and your employer brand because they're in it. They're in the work heavily. Okay. And I'm not saying VPs aren't in the work. I just want to be clear on that. But it's a different perspective. It's a different experience. So thinking about hiring differently and really on like the need and where we need to go has trickle effects from there, right? Because as far as like funding and costs and so forth, we don't necessarily have to always jump to that like C-suite role or VP level role when the work that needs to be done can be at the senior manager or director level, someone who's also going to pour into that employer branding and culture.
Emma, maybe I turn it over to you, right? Like when you are at an early stage company and it's just you, how do you balance that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of it goes back to finding the tools that we talked about earlier that you can leverage, finding the champions in an organization, and then having almost like a plan in the background of what you want to build out in a full year, but knowing you can only tackle so much. One of the things that I play with a lot, and my team's always smiling at me. I'm like, all right, let's do a pilot. It's like smaller, it's contained, or let's run a short initiative to get data, see how the employees respond to it, see how candidates respond to it. So I think that's another really good strategy where you can balance things in the workforce if you are a team of one or you're in a smaller company. So like an example of that right now, we're running a initiative called Work Style Hacks, and it's all about like productivity in the workplace. It's a small 5-week program that one of my team members is running. So pilots and small initiatives that can go a long way, and it can be really cool because you see what your employees or candidates latch onto. Make some adjustments, iterate, and then run it again, like version 2.0. So I think that's something you can definitely leverage even if you're a team of one.
Absolutely. So you guys have mentioned advocacy and champions of the employer brand internally, right? It's not just recruiting, it's not just the people culture team or the EB team, but everyone has kind of the shared responsibility, right? So what are some effective ways to encourage all employees to become brand ambassadors and actively participate in EB?
I think if the candidate experience in the interview process is delivered and complements the EB strategy, then that's something that they're automatically walking into your company, understanding and living. Again, it goes back to having that really clearly defined profile. And it's integrated in, right? It's not necessarily going to the employees like, you have to champion this, you have to do this. You should know what it is and find those qualities in your candidates to find that quality candidate to join. So if you're authentically showing up with your EB strategy, then those that you attract and hire aren't necessarily like taking on a persona. They're part of that persona. They already have those values ingrained, and it's just living at that point, right? It's living and working in that bubble, or not bubble. I don't want to say bubble, but like living in that. So everyone automatically should be already enhancing it versus trying to get people on board.
I think there's a few different things. Like one of my favorite ways is I feel like there's so many competitive people out there. So if you want to run a competition to get people involved in your employment branding strategy, for example, if you want to collect photos or do posts around, hey, like send us a picture while you're on vacation in your Vicarious surgical t-shirt or whatever it is, like that can be a fun way to generate a lot of content that you can push out there, but it's employee driven content where they're sending it to you. So that can be pretty impactful. So that's definitely like a cool way to tap into a competition.
So along the lines of gamification, like we all know we're leaders. We know which ones maybe have like an internal competition with, like another leader. I like to use like employee referral data and say, hey, leader, the R&D department, you're actually like 5th within the common terms employee referrals. Like, what can we do to bump you up the list? I'm like, oh, wow, you're right. Like, and then how do we, get that leader to light a fire under their team, say, hey, we need to increase employee referrals because we're getting smoked by the sales department. And you make it fun and kitschy. And like, that's also a great way to kind of build that internal buy-in because like, hey, we don't want to lose the sales or we want to lose the marketing. And so we've done that at companies. Like, but again, going back to the data helps to influence the decisions that we're trying to make.
Thank you. So I got the signal to wrap things up. And hopefully we still have a few more minutes and take any questions.
Just quick question for Emma. You mentioned a really great free tool. Can you please say it again?
Yes. It's Change Engine is the name of the company, and they have a tab on their website where you can go to free tools, and it's called the Employee Appreciator.
Thank you all so much. This has been so awesome. I love this topic. Emma mentioned a little bit about being a team of one. I wanted to get your sort of like tactical thoughts on a lot of companies that I've worked with. It seems like talent brand belongs to talent acquisition and marketing only wants to focus on corporate brand. How do I convince, like they have like Photoshop and like all kinds of cool creative tools. Like how can I convince them to like give me some cycles and like help me refine the marketing message of the talent brand?
Jason,
I didn't want to just talk first. How I've always done it is like, hey, like, can you share a login? Actually, not share. Can I get a login? And then one is I will learn the tool on my own and then reach out to like, someone who I feel comfortable with if I run into roadblocks. Or like, hey, can you build a template for me and then give me access so I can just swap out text and photos? Because like a lot of my employment brand career is like YouTube's my best friend. I'm learning Photoshop, I'm learning Premiere, I'm learning XD. But I'll go to a designer and say, hey, I'm trying to do this thing. Here's what I've done. I'm running into a roadblock. Can you help me? And they'll see the efforts that I've tried to make, knowing that I'm not an expert. And then they'll be like, oh, wow, like you've taken the initiative to want to learn and be self-sufficient. Let me help you out. But I think it's just kind of getting that initial hurdle of like, can you just create a template for me? And then I can then, swap out. So that way you're not always going back to them. But I think there's a bigger conversation because I've been there where I'm under talent. Marketing is like, you're over there. And then it's like, no, we should be working more closely. But maybe that's a conversation we can have offline because, that, involves bringing leaders and how do we get everyone to the table to say, let's all row, in the same direction.
Just to add on that, I mean, the data, right? So if I look across socials, I'm like, what are some of the trending posts? They're on people and culture. So I think leveraging some of those data points, I know, I take an Instagram, for example, the posts that are showcasing our teams or people or culture tend to do much better than, this new product feature that we released, et cetera. So leading with data.
And if all else fails, next time marketing has an open rec, be like, hey, let's talk about this.
Hold the red hostage.
Yeah, like, hey, I'll do that. Let's make an agreement here.
Hi, thank you all for your time and your insights. For an earlier stage company that maybe doesn't have internal branding or even talent acquisition yet, and you're leveraging relationships with external firms, What would you recommend as the best way to partner with those external firms to ensure they're kind of putting that same unified brand messaging out to candidates that they're engaging with? Would love to hear your thoughts.
How I've done it in the past is maybe like that initial kickoff meeting, you bring your internal stakeholders, so like marketing, whoever else, and that way everyone is hearing the same information at once. So it's like, hey, external team, here's the internal team, internal team, can you communicate the brand standards? Can you communicate what we expect of them? And then maybe it's like setting up some type of like approval processes. So when I was at a sports betting company, we work with an external agency. Anything that was like brand new, if it was a career side or a paid campaign, the internal team always saw the work first. They always signed off first and make sure, hey, when I'm then communicating to leaders, hey, the internal marketing brand, they already signed off on it, and then you can get your additional approvals. I think just bringing everyone together early on and setting the right standards, approval processes should hopefully eliminate any friction once you and that external team are, cooking.
I would also throw out there considering the difference between like using a firm versus a fractional individual who can come in and integrate with your world and the company. So they're experiencing firsthand and they're really in that like the cream of the creme, right? Like at that early stage to really continue to build the foundation for you that then is at a solid point and has been fully defined to then maybe bring in the firm to then execute and move forward is another perspective of something to think about.
And to add on quickly, also the EVP, right? Once you say this is who we are, this is what we value, this is our mission, I think being able to articulate that to any external firm will help kind of talk to the people, culture, what you believe in. And I think that really helps too.
Okay, thank you. Social media has skyrocketed so much over the last 5 years or something. And this may be so situational that might be tough to craft a general strategy. But what do you do if you get hammered on social media?
Like if there's a bad press almost type on social media. Yeah. I think that ties a little bit back to the conversation we were having on Glassdoor. Like Glassdoor is almost like a form of social media. It's a data point. It's being calm when you're crafting a response and choosing when the right time is to respond and when the right time is to let it go as well. So there's so much that goes into it, but I think some of the main things are being really thoughtful when you're thinking about how you respond, really evaluating if there's truth in the statement or if, there isn't truth in the statement, and then coming back to like what your company believes in, what they're trying to do. But yeah, I would tie it most closely back to the conversation we had on Glassdoor.
Is your question around managing social media, or is it around developing a social? Untrue. One thing you can do is like direct that conversation offline. Hey, thank you for, your comment. Please email, some standardized email, at your company, and then you can hand it offline. So externally, people see that, hey, you addressed it, but then you can take care of it, because a lot of previous roles of responding Glassdoor reviews, if it's from a current employee, hey, thank you for your feedback. I see that, you may be having an unpleasant time. For us to kind of dig deep on where we can improve, hey, please reach out to HRBP or please reach out to people at blank. So you address it externally, but then you can handle it offline and avoid any kind of necessary back and forth.
Hi, I just wanted to reiterate what you said about fractional. I think that for small, fast growth companies, if they don't have, and they may not even need or can't afford full-time people like yourself, having someone build the infrastructure and the systems before is good. And then I wanted to reiterate Change Engine. As a chief people officer, I was exactly where some of you have been, that marketing was very focused on outward, and we weren't experts in branding or using the tools either. And they have great tools, and you can upload all the marketing branding, so it's very online. So just a shout out to both of those tools. Thanks.
Yeah, hi. The question is again from the standpoint of early stage startup where, again, don't have a whole lot of branding, maybe even you're starting off in stealth. And so one question is like in job postings, for example, especially also if you're hiring remotely, for example, are there things that you would recommend that you can convey through the job posting itself to try to, you know, sort of pass on brand and attract talent?
Yeah, I feel like your opener is huge. So when you think about the opener that you're going to have in probably most of your job openings, that's your huge opportunity to showcase your unique brand, showcase what your company does. So that's the first thing that comes to mind when I think about job postings. It's like, make sure that opening is going to grab people's attention.
Mhm.
I think there's a few different formats when it comes to job descriptions that are helpful. If you're the company that's really champion for career growth and development, having a format that says, you know, within 30 days you will have, within 60 days, that structure right there already shows, oh, okay, so they're literally like clear on what this looks like, right? So that I can show up as my best self and ask myself, is 30 days something that I can do? Or perhaps is there a learning curve that I need to be aware of so that when I show up day one, I can hit the ground running? Also being able to ask those questions. It makes it very clear on what is the ask and what's on offer to then be able to move forward accordingly. I also am a true believer of having, we don't want to throw everything into a job description because as humans, most of the time they're reading it on this, right? So a job description that's like they have to swipe more than once, they're probably not reading most of it. And they're going to go to the part that probably like, oh, requirements, knows Microsoft. Yeah, I'm a people person. Great. Awesome. Be very concrete with what are the things that an individual needs to have that will make them successful in the role. Clarity around that is kind.
I also think about where you're posting jobs, right? So way back when I was at a 30-person Series A company, and as I was trying to reach out to people, they're like, no idea what this company is, like interesting kind of product, but it's hard when you're going up against, you know, the FANG Mang companies now, right? Or any big tech organization. So I would say there's platforms like the VentureFizz, like the built-ins, AngelList, like Y Combinator, right? Where the community of job seekers are probably more in line with who you're trying to attract. So it does make it a little bit easier when you target a specific profile.
I would say too, being early stage, you can share your story. Hey, like here's who we are, here's why we got started, here's, you know, our goal, and like, do you want to be part of this journey? Because your early stage, it's a journey. No one's expecting you to have this fully fledged plan and X, Y, and Z. So like you can like talk to candidates through your job descriptions of like who you are, what you're looking for. Hey, there's going to be some ambiguity. We're early stage. We're not going to have everything figured out. And that allows you to attract the right talent. It's okay. Like if I thrive in a big organization where I know what came before me, I know what's going after me. Okay, your startup might be the right fit. So I won't submit an application. You want to attract the right talent. So like speak to who you want to hire. Speak as a human. Your JDs don't need to sound like it went through 8 revisions with corporate comms. Just talk about the passion of why you got started, but also who you're hiring and where they can help you take this idea.
And one of the coolest things I've seen, and I feel like these job postings get so much traction is if you record a short video and you post that on LinkedIn and it's you as the hiring manager or you as the founder speaking to it. It's super short, but it grabs people's attention, especially if it's under a minute. I feel like anyone that's posting a video of a job description, it sort of like blows up and gets all this attention. So that's another really cool creative way you can grab people's attention and convey your employment brand.
Keep the human in it.
Yeah.
I have a question about government grants. So we have submitted already 2 applications. One was granted with positions which are part-time. Clearly, just because we couldn't ask for more money due to grant limitations. How do you recommend hiring technicians, scientists for part-time positions, assuming that this part-time position could be full-time one day, but not now? How do you have any recommendations? Is that equity compensation or any other tricks?
Well, I think you have an opportunity to be creative with it, right? So what does that look like? What do you want to create with this employee that's coming in on a part-time? What's the experience that you're putting on offer for them to be interested and be engaged in your overall mission and your journey? Like Jason was saying, like gravitating that being the reason, right? When it comes to like, I understand like specific, like on the scientific side, there's nuances that need to be flushed out, but being really upfront with what the vision of what you're trying to do and how it relates to this position is the first major step. And then just getting into conversations. It may be finding after a few conversations with a few individuals that, you were pretty rigid on them being on site 4 days a week. And given the situation, you may have to tweak that a little bit. So just have the conversations, be clear on what you want to create and what the ask is, and then tweak that along the way as you're getting data from the conversations that you're having. Don't obviously compromise what your need is, right? But ask yourself, what is a must in order for this to be successful versus what's a nice to have, and mold it through there, but continuing to have those conversations. And there are platforms out there that are specifically part-time job boards. So I would encourage to look at those. And if there's nothing that comes to mind, send me a message on LinkedIn. I'd be happy to share some.
Also too, like there's a community for everything and everyone. So what are certain communities you can share your jobs in and facilitate a conversation and say, hey, this is part-time, who's interested, what are your thoughts, and kind of get feedback from external folks on what this is, and then use that to kind of shape your job description or even how you hire. Really getting real-time feedback from community members is a great way to help influence.
When you're creating a job listing for an early stage startup, what are the things that you think? I know you mentioned like it's important to find the right person and who has the right attributes for that type of job, but what are the most important things to mention in those job listings to come off correctly, but also find the right person? I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah. Depends on the position, right? There's certain, like if we're talking about like software engineering, that's very like black and white, like you need to know Linux or R, Python, right? If it's more so, let's say like a marketing role, me personally, like I look at it from the bullets that I'm putting on here are the things that are clear in terms of experience or skills that need to be possessed by the candidate in order for them to be successful, right? So like putting a bullet of like, communicates well. Everyone's going to say they communicate really well, right? So how does this position live in your environment? How is this position a level up for the organization? What are the key things for even speaking directly to the candidate, as Jason mentioned, in order for you to be successful? These are the things that you need to be strong in or need to know. And even mentioning in some points, like, we would love to have experience with e-commerce, but if you don't know, we can teach. Like putting in bullets like that show you're investing a little bit in them definitely pulls candidates in. And it's a happy medium in terms of like, one, this is what we need and we can't move on this, but here's what we also are willing to invest in you in terms of what potentially this could mean for you.
Like a lot of job descriptions are treated as like a holiday wish list. I want this and I want this and I want this. And it becomes this impossible person that you're never going to find. Have a V1 of what you think you're looking for and then get feedback from folks in the community who you trust. Hey, I'm trying to hire this type of person. As I talk out loud, oh, maybe I should tweak this in the JD. Maybe I should tweak this. So like be realistic with a little bit of aspiration, but don't make it like some impossible person that doesn't exist.
I always think about the startup mindset. Like if you start with just making a wish list or a holiday list of what you want people to come to your startup with. For example, oftentimes when I'm talking to founders, one of the number one things I hear is like, oh, I want a self-starter, someone that can run autonomously, someone that's driven and ambitious, and they're going to drive themselves. So if you think about what goes into that ideal, again, like startup mindset, then that can help you tailor almost the end of the job description or the beginning of the job description. If you have a requirements section, I usually title that about you, and speak to a little bit of the mindset of someone that would be successful in your startup and would thrive there. Then that can also hook people's attention if they have some of those characteristics, because then they start envisioning, oh, okay, so my colleagues are going to have this type of mindset. So I find that super helpful.
Fun's over.
I know. Dun, 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 dun. Here I come.
You're all day.
Thank you all to our wonderful panelists. Let's give them a big round of applause. Thank you again so much for all of your time. We do have a lot more in store, both for today and for the rest of the week. We also will be having a career fair kicking off tonight, 6 p.m. right here at Suffolk University. Now, in this room specifically, the next session name is Deliberations, Exploring Careers in Legal Tech. If that is not what you're looking for, you will need to change rooms, and our folks at the registration desk right out front will be able to direct you and get you where you need to be. If you are sticking around for the next event in this room, then please have your QR codes ready to scan. We'll be coming around to scan those for the next session. If you are joining us virtually, you don't need to go anywhere. Just hang tight. We'll be right back with the next session in a couple of minutes. And one quick plug, Kevin Ty from 3 Circles Studio is our photography partner for Startup Boston Week. Come and scan this QR so that you can see all the areas in which you've been spotted throughout Startup Boston Week. Thanks again. Keep in touch and see you in a few minutes.
Thank you.